Have you told your friends that you see ghosts?
Oh, absolutely not.
Gina Rodriguez returns in Not Dead Yet.
I'm back, baby.
Who is that?
Oh, she's the obituary writer.
And Brad Garrett joins the brilliant ensemble cast.
Titan, Maverick, Titan of all Mavericks. These are all words used to describe me.
Not Dead Yet. Season premiere. Tonight, 8:30, 7:30 Central on ABC. And stream on Hulu.
It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
This is the Happy Families podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. Hopefully you're having a wonderful, wonderful school holiday experience with your kids and getting some extra parenting tips along the way. Today, we're going to have a conversation about a topic that, let's just say it like this. We are going to slay a sacred cow of parenting advice. On the scale of degree of how severely bad some parenting advice is, this one's not right up there with the worst of it, but it's one of those things that I just think needs a conversation now and then to remind parents that the way we give feedback to our children matters. I ran a presentation at a beautiful school in the Redland Bay area, the Bayside area of Brisbane, Ormiston College. And while I was there, one of the questions from one of the parents was, what do I do about, what's the right way to praise my child when they do something well? Because I want to really encourage them and I want them to be motivated to do their schoolwork and to do well at sports and cross-country and music and all the things that this parent was invested in their child doing well in. It was a great question. And I had to do the big, okay, here we go. We're going to go deep. I've got to take a deep breath. And that's what we're going to do today. I just thought it was such an important thing for us to talk about because there is this belief out there, Kylie, that we're supposed to pump up our kids' tires to make them feel good and to help them to be motivated.
So this is an area that kind of, I think even as a parent and as an individual, take parenting out of the equation that I really grapple with. In my early childhood background, our lecturers used to talk to us a lot about the need to not evaluate the children within our care's efforts in any shape or form, regardless of what it was, whether it was they were at the art table or they were doing Play-Doh or they were just climbing the climbing frames.
So just don't evaluate.
There was no evaluation to be given. And so over time, you learn the art of asking questions as opposed to labeling children. But I know in my own life, when I do something really good and I'm really proud of it, I want to hear that acknowledgement that someone else recognizes the effort or the magnitude of what I've achieved.
I love that you're saying this because you've married the guy who is a complete non-praiser.
Yeah, totally.
But
no, let me finish.
Okay.
But
we're both butting all over each other.
But there are times where people have, for all intents and purposes, evaluated what I've done, not to the standard that I feel I've done it. And I'm like, you don't have a clue. That was a really good effort. And
you just said, good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I want recognition and acknowledgement, but I want it to be to the level that I think that it deserves.
That's exactly right.
And if I don't get it, then you're not praising well enough. That doesn't work.
So let's debunk it. You obviously are really strong on this praise thing.
I really am. Yeah. I remember about 20 years ago when our eldest was only quite young and we were with some friends and I made this comment about how it would be better to not praise the kids. And he rolled his eyes, Steve, and said, oh, are you one of those non-praise people? And I was like, yeah, I am, but there's actually good evidence for it. And over the last 20 years, we've got even more evidence for it. So first of all, it's probably worth just highlighting why people praise. I think we need to spend some time there. We have this sense that it's going to be motivating for kids. And it's true that it is. We've got plenty of research that shows that in the instance that somebody receives praise, whether they're a child or an adult, it feels nice, but only in the instant. And there's even some research that calls that into question. So there's some research that says that if you praise a child and say, oh, good job, or great sharing, or super running, or nice tidying, or any of those kinds of throwaway praisey kind of lines, sometimes, not always, it depends on how you do it in the context, but quite often children will infer low ability. That is, if you're praising me for doing it, you must think I'm not good at it.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about the times where I have done things and I haven't been proud of it. I don't feel like it's a great job.
Right.
And yet somebody will tell me that it is. And my instant thought process is, you're just saying that because you love me, or you're just saying that because you have to.
When I was a teenager, I jumped on the bus, paid my fare to go to the beach. The bus driver gave me my change, and as I walked to my seat to put my surfboard into the bus and sit down beside it, I realised that the bus driver had given me too much change. For some reason, I walked back to him and said, "You gave me 20 cents too much change." And he praised me for it. He said, "Oh, good boy. You're such an honest boy." I was like 14 or 13 or something like that. And I remember as he said it, I cringed inside because as soon as he said it, I thought of all the times that I haven't been honest. And I thought, oh, buddy, you don't know the half of it. I don't actually know why I gave you the 20 cents back because I am not an honest boy. And him saying that made me hyper aware that I did not deserve that praise. But we do it because we want to motivate a certain kind of behavior. Other research suggests that we praise our kids because we want to boost their self-esteem. You know how I respond to that? When you teach your children to look to external sources for validation of their value and their worth, you do not boost their self-esteem.
No.
What also has been shown in research is that while you might get a subsequent boost in happiness, motivation, satisfaction with life when you get praise, if you get praise for, let's say, getting an A+ on an exam, "Oh, great job. You're so smart. I think that you might be my gifted child." Like you say that to the kiddo. And then they do the next exam and they don't get the A+. They get a B-. What does that say about whether they really are gifted or not?
They've lost their gift.
Completely. It means that they're not nearly as smart. But what does it also say about your judgment? Now they're going to question your judgment. "Oh, my parents are just saying it because they have to. My parents' judgment is flawed, just like my intelligence is flawed." And so it's not so much what happens in the immediate moment, it's the aftermath when there is a subsequent setback that is challenging. Got a couple of other reasons that people praise their kids. They'll often do it as an incentive, like they're doing it to really, I guess, push them along.
I've heard many times, especially in the classroom, praise the good, ignore the bad for kids that are really, really struggling. And so you've got this kid who, 90% of the time is quite disruptive in class, but the 3 or 4 times in a day where they're sitting quietly, ham it up.
Yes.
Make a really big deal about it.
Yeah.
And yet you're suggesting that even that's flawed as well.
Deeply, deeply. In fact, a couple of my notes here that I was thinking about, I wrote down, we praise the kids that we think need it because it will help them believe that they're good. This is that classic, I don't know if it was like this when you were at school, and I'm hoping that most schools don't do this anymore, but this is that thing where the kid that is a really challenging kid in class is good for 3 minutes and the teacher says, "Oh, I'm going to give you a gold star. I'm going to give you a merit award for assembly on Friday." And the kids are sitting there going, the teacher's only doing this because that kid never gets one and they needed to find an excuse. Like the kids can see it and even the one who gets it can. But I think the number one reason that we praise our kids is because it feels like it's right to say nice things. I feel like that's what we're supposed to do.
So I know you're saying all of this, but this is ingrained in society.
Totally.
And
so deeply.
And I think that most people would really struggle with the idea that we are not supposed to praise our kids specifically. Is there any science behind this? Because this is big.
Yeah. So I'm going to step through maybe 3 or 4 research articles in 30 seconds or less for each one.
This is not a doctor's desk.
This is not a doctor's desk episode, but it's really important. So in the early 1990s, one of my favourite studies on praise was published. It was a really smart study by a guy called Meyer. And what he found is, he called it the paradoxical effects of praise and criticism on perceived ability. Essentially what he found is once kids get to about the age of 5 or 6, when we praise them and tell them how good they are, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I want to go into a bit about why they actually think, I mustn't be very good if you have to give me praise around this. And the way it works is it's kind of like I'm going to infer low ability to myself if you're telling me I'm great.
Or if I'm great doing this and I know that I've only done a mediocre job, then I actually don't need to try any harder to get the same praise.
It can do that as well. Yeah. But I would imagine it's kind of like sitting at the dinner table and your parents are saying, oh, this broccoli, oh my goodness, I've never had broccoli like this, kiddo. You got to try this broccoli. It is amazing. Oh, I'm putting it in my mouth now. Oh, the broccoli is so good. And as a child, you're looking at your parent going, if you're trying to sell it that hard, broccoli must be the most disgusting thing on the face of the earth. I'm never going to eat broccoli. So there's a paradoxical effect. That is, the more we pump it up, the more the kids are like, yeah, right. Now, there's a 2014 study that was done by a guy called Eddie Bremelman and his colleagues, and this is a really interesting one as well. That's not beautiful. That's incredibly beautiful. The adverse impact of inflated praise on children with low self-esteem. So what they've basically said is with kids who have low self-esteem, based on what we know from Meyer's study, the last thing we want to do is give praise to kids with low self-esteem, because the paradoxical effect is that they are going to think they're even worse, right? But what we do instead, according to Bremelman, is we give inflated praise to those with the lowest self-esteem. So if I feel lousy about myself and I've got a parent saying, oh, that is such a brilliant job. Oh, you are amazing. You did such a good job on that. As the kid with low self-esteem, I'm going, wow, I must really suck, because they are trying so hard to make me feel good about this, which means that their perception of me is that I'm terrible at it. And what the researchers found was that inflated praise decreases challenge seeking in children with low self-esteem, and it has the opposite effect on kids with high self-esteem. But you don't need to worry about praising the kids with high self-esteem, right? Because they already feel awesome about life and they're going to do whatever they do anyway. So that was a really fascinating one. And while I could run through a whole lot of others, I'm just going to mention one more because it really is the praise research synthesis. This is the one that pulls it all together. It's actually about 20 years old now, but it's just so good. It's called The Effects of Praise on Children's Intrinsic Motivation, a review and synthesis by a lady called Jennifer Henderlong, now Henderlong Lepper, and Mark Lepper from Stanford. And what they've effectively found is that the more we praise kids, the more we reduce their intrinsic motivation, and the less likely it is that they're going to be creative or curious or motivated. And all we're really doing is promoting comparison and competition. We've got to stop praising our kids.
This reminds me of some of the conversations we've had with Alfie Cohn on the podcast. He talks a lot about intrinsic motivation and how praise and rewards specifically can lessen that in our kids.
So I shared all this with these parents and their heads were spinning. They're like, well, what are we supposed to say?
Yeah. What do you say? Like, how do we support our kids and, you know, kind of let them know that we recognize the effort?
Yeah.
How do we do that without saying you're a great kid?
And the Carol Dweck research on mindset is all about praising the effort, not the outcome. But I think that these studies and several others are strong enough to call that profoundly into question. I don't think that Carol Dweck has that right. I don't think praise is necessary at all. What were you told to do when a kid came to you in an early childcare setting and they did something great? Maybe it was painting, maybe it was drawing, maybe it was helping somebody, but they were looking for some feedback, they were looking for some affirmation, or they just wanted to show you the cool thing that they'd done.
Ask questions. Lots of questions.
Like what?
So how do you feel about what you did?
Look at my painting. Do you like it? Or how do you feel about it?
Or acknowledge what we see. So specifically, so if it's a painting, for instance, it'd be like, wow, you've used lots of blue in this painting and then you've got this tiny pop of red. You know, how do you feel about what you've done?
It feels a lot more effortful than good job.
Oh, totally.
Or great painting.
And it doesn't come naturally.
No.
Like when they first were teaching me how to do it, it felt so robotic and rote because I was kind of following a script.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
of what needed to happen.
I'm so glad you said it. You have to practice. And even hearing you say it then, it was kind of like, there's a bit of cringe to that. I've worked on this for 20 plus years with our kids. I mean, I've been thinking about it deeply for 20 plus years, and I don't know if you've noticed what I say when the kids come into the kitchen and they say, Dad, I got an A minus or I got an A plus or I thought I was going to fail, but I ended up with a B plus. I mean, they don't even have to have kicked it out of the park. They're just really, really happy with the result that they got. Have you noticed what I say to them?
You say, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Normally I won't ask the question straight away though. Normally I'll reflect what I'm seeing. I'll say what I see. So when They're bouncing off the walls.
You seem really happy about that.
Yeah, and I'll say, oh, you seem so stoked. And I'll give them a great big hug and I'll say, look at the smile on your face. That must have felt so good when you got that result. And so what I'm describing to them is what I'm seeing on their face, what I'm seeing in their behaviour as a result of the grade. Or the fact that they won the race, or they got a result somewhere. They got the part in the play. And the cool thing about that is it works when they're disappointed as well. They come into the kitchen, they're devastated because they failed or they got a C or whatever. And I'll say, wow, it looks like that one really hurt. Or it sounds like you expected to get a better result and this hasn't worked out for you. And what that does is it takes away all of the evaluation. It takes away all of that. My parents are trying to manipulate me into eating the broccoli. My parents are trying to prove to me that I'm smart. Because the thing we want to do is we want to get reassurance, right? We want to say to the kids, oh, but you're a smart kid. It must have just been one of those days. What happened? Why did we kind of give them the feedback that doesn't work. So I would say the best thing you can do is just point out, here's what I'm seeing. You seem so excited. Wow, that looks like that really hurt. And then once they've given their own feedback to you about how they feel about it, whether it was great or not, then you can say, well, you know what? I just love you like crazy. Give me a hug. Congratulations on the grade. Or you might say, oh, well, that must have hurt. Come and give me a hug. Let's talk about what we can do next time so that this doesn't happen again. I presume you don't want to get more C's. I presume you don't want to miss out on that thing that's important to you. And you start to problem solve. In fact, even when they do well, you start to problem solve. You got that A. How did you get it? What can we do to make sure that you keep getting this? Because it feels pretty darn good, doesn't it? And so the conversation is qualitatively different. It's not praise anymore. They've done their own praising. And now you can just have a conversation about what you see, how they feel, how they got there, and what might happen next time to get results that are in line with what they're looking for in life.
So if this is the avenue that we're taking with them as children, how do we get them to adults who actually don't need the evaluation of others? They don't need the praise from other people. They don't need the recognition.
I actually think this is the process. See, when I say to my child, oh, I can see on your face, this must have lit you up when you got that outcome. What my child then does is they say, oh yeah, I am really pumped. I'm so happy. I did a great job. In fact, I'll usually say to me, Dad, I worked so hard. I studied, I ran, I practiced, I did this, blah, blah, blah. I did all the stuff and I got the outcome. And then I get to say, well, what does that tell us? What does that teach you? So what are we going to do next time to make sure that we get the same thing? And they're actually hearing their inner voice and they're looking inwards for their evaluations of their outcomes, their evaluation of their worth as a person rather than looking to me. What I'm doing instead is I'm supporting them as they look inside. And the cool thing then is once they've done that, I can give them that hug and say, you know what? I'm so proud of you. I'm not proud of you because of the result. I'm proud of you because of the way you're thinking about this. And so this is they've already done their praising. I can say anything after that. It doesn't really matter. But the critical thing here is they're learning to listen to their voice. And as they do that, they become more confident in themselves, which means they are less likely to look outward for evaluation.
Well, what I love about this process is you talk about that inner voice. You're actually helping them to express that inner voice.
Yeah.
And helping them to recognize that it's their voice, not yours.
We really hope that this has been an informative and maybe mindset-changing conversation about the perils of praise and what we can do instead. Thanks so much for joining us on the Happy Families podcast. It's produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more information about making your family happier, you can find an entire chapter about this topic in my book, 9 Ways to a Resilient Child. It's online or in bookstores, wherever you grab your books. And for more about making your family happier, check us out at happyfamilies.com.au or on Facebook at Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families.